Good morning. I'm so glad you could join me. It's time for Nostril Zone AM, the only cartoon and comics interview program in the morning. I'm your host, cartoonist Kyle Bridget, and today I sat down with publisher and fellow cartoonist Craig Yoe to discuss his career and his new book, Woman and Man Plus from Clover Press. So let's cut to that interview, already in progress.
Chicago with my parents. I think my dad maybe had some business there. And I went to a head shop because you one of the touristy things to do was to go to on the street where it had all these hippies that you could look at. So I walked into a head shop while I was waiting for the dinner to be served across the street, and I picked up Jay Lynch and Skip Williamson's Chicago Mirror, and I picked up the first issue of Zap Comics, and these things blew my mind. And I never looked back. And in fact, there was a phone number in the Chicago Mirror, so I called Jay Lynch, and till the day he died, he remembered when I called him because I was one of the few people that actually, you know, made contact with the publisher and stuff like that. So Jay Lynch and I went on to become friends, and I worked with him. I became an art director at for different companies, and I often tried to use Jay, and I actually hired him as an employee when I worked for a toy company in Chicago.
And you also worked with Jim Henson. And if I understand correctly, you were like the general manager for the Muppets?
Well, I went from the toy company to the world's first and biggest toy think tank, Marvin Glass and Associates. They created like Light Bright and the Operation Game and Chatty Cathy and Mousetrap and all. So and they create a lot of novelty things like chattering teeth and giant sunglasses. So it was a famous toy think tank. So I worked for them, but I at the toy company I had done we had a Muppet license, so I met the Muppet people. So at a certain point, Jim Henson contacted me and wanted, he liked what I was doing with the Muppet things I was designing. So they were looking for an art director. So they flew me out to New York, and I met all the Muppet people, and Jim and I really hit it off, and he hired me to be the creative director, and then he eventually made me creative director slash vice president general manager of the company because I had both a creative skills and also business skills. I was running a nightclub, I was publishing a newspaper. So many artists don't have a business, and so many business people don't have a creative bone in their body. But I for better or for
You
worse, I
can you
combined
can walk both worlds. You're like a day walker or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
Yeah.
I prefer the creative side. It's a little bit more fun than business, but I have a business sense and management skills.
Well, that's a good thing to have as a cartoonist.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I can't believe I pinched myself. I can't believe I've never worked a day in my life.
I gotta know. So, what is Sweetums like in real life? Did you ever meet him?
I don't want to destroy the illusion, about the Muppets. I'm not going to tell you what Miss Piggy was really like, or Sweetums, or
All right. I can
they're
respect that.
lovely people, but they're
I've met a few. I've met Kermit and I've met Fozzie. It's the only time I was ever starstruck in my life.
Animal was my favorite. In fact, if you pardon the pun, he's my spirit animal. I like Animal a lot. I mean, no one dislikes Kermit. I mean, we all love him, right? I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
here he is. Here he is.
Yeah, he's a beautiful person.
I mean, I was doing a lot of creative things before I hooked up with the Muppets, but I mean, Jim was inspiring, and he was a man of peace and love and creativity and gentle, and he was the prototype for a good human. You know,
Yeah.
uh, so there needs to be more Jim Henson in the world. You know,
Well, I think I agree with you there. So after he passed, Yo Studios, it's producing logos, publications, style guides, toys for Kellogg's, Disney, Marvel, DC, Nickelodeon. I have one question for you about this period. how involved were you with GAC, and how much free GAC did you get?
I eventually Nickelodeon had me become the creative director for different things, but including all their licensing things. So I was working directly with Mattel as the creative director for Nickelodeon for GAC. So all those GAC products and games and kits and all those things went through me. I worked with on GAC for sure. Yeah, GAC was a big part of my life.
You're all gacked up. So, like, when you would go in for, like, a big corporate meeting, they'd have the long table, and then in the middle is, like, where normally they'd have treats, they just have, like, bowls of GAC. You could just kinda take a handful, is that how it worked? Or do you prefer not to touch GAC? You probably know something about GAC where it's like, "Oh, shouldn't be touching that."
I also yeah, there was GAC that I guess you weren't supposed to ingest, but I also was the creative director for Nickelodeon for this toy where you strap these things on your feet that had these giant big rubber bands on them, so you were able to jump up and down with these things
And
on your
break your
feet.
ankles.
Well, one of my proudest moments is that particular toy was awarded by the Children's Safety Council as worst toy of the year. So that that's one of my proudest moments.
Jeez. They don't have that on your Wikipedia bio under awards.
So we hired a firm that scrubbed that from the Wikipedia. But I was proud of it. So I think there's still old people now who were kids during the Nickelodeon days who are still hobbling around because they broke their legs in 6 places or something, hopping on my worst toy of the year.
Well, they had a good time. That's the important thing.
They had a good time. That was the important thing. Nickelodeon was kind of using me and my studios kind of as an employee, and we did I don't know 100 hours of work a week for 4 or 5 years, I think, or 3 or 4 or 5 years for Nickelodeon. And it was great. It was during the period where Nickelodeon hadn't got bought by this or that or become part of this and didn't get so corporate and everything. So it was wild and woolly. And it was a lot of fun working with Nick. I noticed you came to the podcast. You kind of hobbled in on your crutches, so you must you must have bought one of those. What were they called? Those toys you jumped up and down.
Is it
Moon
moon
shoes.
boots?
Yeah,
Moon
moon
shoes.
shoes. Yeah.
No, I slipped on some GAC on the way in. Um, so this one I want to bring up quickly because I find it kind of interesting. You did Big Boy magazine for big boy restaurants in the late
Yeah.
90s into the early
Yeah.
2000s. I remember reading that as like
Yeah.
a 12-year-old, and maybe it was kind of schlocky, but it was a legacy title. You worked with Ditko, and I'm just wondering if working on that had any influence on you going into publishing more afterwards.
I mean, I started with publishing because when I was a teenager, doing I was part of the first, the beginning of comics fandom when I was doing fanzines, printing fanzines in my basement. I printed a fanzine called Yoe, which named my name combined with the lead character of Catch 22, which was a big influence on my life. But even then, the first issue used Yoe, everybody else was doing superhero fanzines, and my first issue was about cowboy golden age cowboy comics. I quickly I became I was a Marvel. I guess they're called zombies now. Me and my friends, we all started by collecting Marvel comics and had them all. But I quickly became interested in because of picking up Zap Underground comics, and I was interested in Thomas Nast and Charles Adams, and I just thought well, if comics are cool and interesting and fascinating art form, I want to know everything about them. So I became not only a voracious reader and collector, but I became a historian.
Oh, I hear you.
Oh, you can hear me?
I can hear you now. I'm probably using the mic on your computer now, but it's
Yes.
better than not being able to hear you at all. So
Okay. All right. Where did I cut off? What was I talking about?
I had asked about big boy restaurants, and you were talking about publishing. Yeah, because I asked you if that had an influence on you getting into publishing, and I meant more like your recent wave, like the Yo Books era.
Well, I'll dive in this way. I mean, I loved Big Boy when I was a kid, and I used to go to the restaurant just to pick up the comics and to eat their great double decker. They invented the double decker before McDonald's. So anyway, I was set up at a licensing show, and Big Boy was looking for a new artist, publisher for their comic, and we really hit it off. And they saw what I was doing with Nickelodeon to really connect with kids, and because with my experience with working for Disney and Nickelodeon and the Muppets, my studio was specializing in doing kids stuff. So Big Boy in our studio, Yo Studio, which was founded by myself and Clecia Gusoni, who's still my partner in all publishing. We got the gig to do the Big Boy comic book, which I was thrilled about. Not only was I loved Big Boy, the icon, and Big Boy the comic book, but it was a great gig because we were publishing millions of comics, high press run for Big Boy, and it was we did it I think 8 or 9 times a year, so it was a great gig for many years, and I did get to work with a lot of talented artists. So the main artist was Luke McDonald, who drew Iron Man for Marvel, and he became our staff illustrator at our studio. We had like 20 employees, but he was the staff illustrator. And we produced Big Boy, and we also did a magazine for Mud Jeans, which was distributed to. It was like the hottest brand at the time. We did a magazine with some comics and interviews. We did the first ever interview with Britney Spears. I was speaking at a conference on marketing to kids, and this woman came up to me and said, "Hey, we have this new artist. We're a small record company. We have this new artist we're going to be breaking soon. We think she's perfect for an interview for Mud Magazine." I go, "Well, we do have a couple pages to fill for the next issue, but nobody's ever heard of this Britney Spears. But what the hell? We'll work with you on this." So Brittany was very grateful for that first interview, and when some people in South Africa worked with us to start a magazine for kids there, called Yo Magazine. They called it Yo Magazine. They loved my name, so they called it Yo Magazine. They invited me to Nelson Mandela's birthday party with my first meeting with them, and we started this magazine. And Brittany was the cover feature for the first issue, because by then she was really hot, and you couldn't get an interview with her, but she remembered that I gave her the first interview. So we started Yo Magazine in South Africa. So all this publishing activity, Mud Jeans and Big Boy and Yo Magazine in Africa. Yeah, when things started changing, I became less interested in having 20 employees, and I wanted to start focusing just on my roots of publishing about comics, which is where I started when I was a teenager. I jumped into publishing. I wrote Gary Groth at Fantagraphics and said I wanted to do a series of an anthology collecting weird comics from all eras. It was the ARF series. The first issue was Modern ARF, and then we did ARF Museum and I think ARF Gallery or something like that. So I think we did 3 issues, maybe 4. So that, and then I did some other books with Fantagraphics, like on Booty Rogers, the wild, weird golden age. I think of him as the world's greatest cartoonist. He could
I have that book. It's really good.
He told great stories, and they were wild and
very weird.
And he actually became a good friend of mine. We corresponded, exchanged 3 or 4 letters every week for years.
That's
And
cool.
illustrated letters. I would illustrate a letter and then send it to him, and he'd illustrate a letter and send it back. So someday I'm going to publish a giant book about Booty Rogers. A giant book. That was kind of a little paperback. I'm going to do a giant, history book about Booty Rogers because he was a fascinating, great guy. But we became good friends. I went and stayed with him at times down in Texas. And cool guy, world's greatest cartoonist.
Yeah, he's incredible.
I'm sorry to move away from having a giant studio. I mean, I really enjoyed it and did a lot of great projects for MTV and we worked with Nickelodeon and Big Boy and we did Mad Magazine and we did everything from MTV to Microsoft. Anybody that wanted to reach kids, we were the go-to studio for doing kids-oriented stuff. But on Big Boy, I used Golden Age artists to do some of the covers, Golden Age artists that were still living, and then I had Steve Ditko draw an issue, and it was a lot of fun. I did 3 Steve Ditko books, because Steve is he's the king of comics. Everybody calls him the king of comics, right? Wait, they call somebody else the king of comics, but the true and rightful king of comics, at least overground comics, Steve Ditko.
He's the man who would be king of comics.
Yeah, there wasn't some poser in single pants who call somebody else the king of comics. But Steve Ditko is the rightful ruler of Main Street comics. I mean, maybe Crumb or...
On this show, Crumb is the king of comics, but no, Harvey Kurtzman is the king, I think.
Kurtzman's another guy I became friends with, and he really liked my work and did some drawings for me and this and that. So I loved Kurtzman. He lived 15 minutes from me. I had a big birthday celebration with him in my house, and Al Jaffe came and Bill Elder and all kinds of luminaries. And we had at the birthday party we had a Alfred E. Newman look-alike contest because I bought those big plastic ears for all the party goers, and then that blackout stuff where you can black out a tooth. So we had everybody do cosplay as Alfred E. Newman, and Kurtzman awarded my son as the Alfred E. Newman look-alike. So I'm not sure my son was exactly.
I'm sorry about this.
I don't understand what a great honor that was to be.
It depends who you ask, I think. Okay, so mostly you do like anthologies of comics and books about comics history and stuff like that. But you've also published some like more contemporary stuff, like you did Jim Benton's Clyde. What else comes to mind? I guess Spumco comic book. I think that was.
Yeah.
I mean, that would have been a little bit more contemporary.
And we did a graphic novel, which I mean, I can't take credit for it because I just published the finished thing by Robert Grossman. So I'm not bragging about myself. I'm bragging about the skills of Robert Grossman, the famous illustrator who did the airplane movie poster with the airplane tied in a knot.
Yeah.
A lot of covers for Rolling Stone and Time magazine, but he did a graphic novel and he wanted me to publish it. I can't believe that. So I did, and unfortunately he passed just weeks before it came out. But I think it's one of the most brilliantly written graphic novels of all time. It was nominated for an Eisner, but it really didn't get out there much because we didn't have Robert around to pimp it, So,
yeah.
But it's called Life on the Moon, and I think it's brilliant. So we published that. So we like to do contemporary graphic novels, and we like to do histories of comics, anthologies, and then artist books about specific artists. And we did a book about Sean Dickinson of his great kind of underground, cool artwork. And so we've done Yoe Books has done well over 100 books. We've done these books with Random House and Abrams
And then I think we did over 100 books with IDW, and now we're with the terrific publisher Dark Horse Comics. So we did the first we did a volume of Blab by the brilliant designer Monty Beauchamp put together. He does the Blab series of books. Well, he did started a Blab comics anthology. We published the first volume of that, and that was a proud moment working with Monty. Great privilege. We just had one come out called Space Western Comics, which was one of the weirdest mashups in comics history, where they combined outer space and cowboys fighting Hitler on Mars and dinosaurs on Venus, that kind of stuff. These cowboys.
I'm just curious. One more question about this before we get into your new book.
Just one more question. No, go ahead.
How do you decide what books you publish? Can anybody pitch you? Are you like scouting talent? How does it work?
All the above. I mean, I publish what I love and interested in. I feel is different and worthy. I mean, we did a monograph of Bob Powell. We did a big coffee table book of George Harriman with mostly using original art and his Crazy Cat art, and so these are things I'm interested in. Weird comics and great masters like Harriman and unknown masters like Booty Rogers, and so I'm interested in that. But people pitch us ideas. I think Monty pitched us Blab, and a guy came to me. I had done 3 big large format coffee table books about Ditko, and a guy gave me an idea. A punk rocker friend of mine gave me an idea, like, well, why don't you do a book collecting all his short stories? So there was a lot of 1, 2, and 3 pagers that we collected in a book, and I called it Ditko's Shorts. Meaning short stories and also underwear. So when I see something interesting, somebody on Facebook that has an interesting collection, or I have an idea of my own. So everything from wacky like Booty to beautiful fantasy work like Roy G. Crinkle and Crumb wrote an introduction to my book called Clean Cartoonist's Dirty Drawings, which I did for the esteemed publisher Last Gasp, run by the father and son team of Ron Turner and Colin Turner. So that went into 3 printings, Clean Cartoonist's Dirty Drawings, because we had people like Ernie Bushmuller and Charles Schultz. And
I don't have a copy of that one, but I am familiar with that one. That's probably one of the more.
These artists who were mainstream artists who did dirty drawings. So Crumb wrote an intro to that. He groused in the intro that the drawings weren't dirty enough.
Yeah.
He may have been somewhat right. So it was mostly a lot of tits and ass, not fucking. So
yeah, it wasn't hardcore.
It fell short in Crumb's estimation. I also did museum shows for my book, The Art of Mickey Mouse, which collected artists, which I hired artists from around the world, like Jack Kirby and Charles Schultz and Peter Max, to do their own interpretation of Mickey Mouse. Well, that there was a show of that artwork that went to 9 museums in Japan. They flew me out there, and I was on Japanese TV promoting the show as a news item. So, we did that book. So, what's your next question? You said only one more question, but
one more question before we get to your book.
Oh, okay.
So you've got a brand spanking new graphic novel out, published by Clover and Yoe Books. Without getting into the art, could you describe the plot for me, please?
Well, it's an autobiographical, but it's I call it a loudly wordless book. Doesn't it? I think there's a few words here or there, like da da gurk or something, but basically, it's
But there's a
autobiographical.
plot.
Well, I'm trying to describe the circumstance and what the plot's about. There's plots, but there's also a plot, and the plot is it's the story of my life over the last couple of years when my lifelong partner and wife and mother of three of my kids decided that she wanted to move on and not be married anymore. So that broke my heart and upended we had moved first to Germany, where I got very involved with the underground comic scene in Berlin, which was quite inspiring. There are a lot of brilliant artists, wonderful people who kind of took me into their fold. But then we went from there to the Canary Islands, which when my wife told me of her decision to, like, not be married anymore. So that broke my heart, upended my plans to be in Europe, and really pretty much destroyed me. I mean, I became quite depressed, even went pretty close to the edge, a few times. Stared
That
into
seems to
the
be
abyss.
expressed in the book for sure. Like there's
Yeah,
definitely like a lot of like confronting mortality and like depression and stuff in there.
yeah.
Definitely that comes across for sure.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, I don't think if you read it, it's totally depressing, because
It's not at all
some
depressing as like a
used to,
work.
used to be a hopeless doper, but now I'm a dopeless hoper. I still hang on to some hope. You know what I mean? So I think
Yeah.
that it reflects that too, and there's hope and humor in the midst of all the heartbreak and depression too. So it's very, but it's telling. I drew like one page a day for a couple, nearly a couple of years, and these pages are again very psychedelic. They're symbol. It's I think it's very different in that it's each page has images, these weird images that are symbolic. They're symbolism. So you kind of have to. I mean, it's not a chore. I think it's interesting that you kind of have to interpret what's going on, and you kind of maybe identify with some of the emotions in there, because we've all had ups and downs, and probably
Yeah.
everybody at one point has had a heartbreak and love and
There's also
struggles.
different locations too. So it's like an autobiographical memoir of love, loss, and self-discovery, according to the book jacket. It spans
Yeah,
4 countries, but there's not really any dialogue or like outright narration. It's told through spontaneous, surreal, psychosexual, quasi-religious, chaotic, cosmic, cartoon symbolism, with just the basic concept of the 6-panel comic page as like a connective motif throughout like a sequence of vibes. Basically, it's like looking at tarot cards on acid or something, or like a 17th century alchemical engraving. It's like hieroglyphic. But you say that the plot is more of a suggestion for the reader.
well, I would use the word suggestion. I think there is a plot, and it's real. It's the story about losing my country, losing my wife, and some people say losing my mind. So it's a story about. It's definitely a story about that, and I do suggest that people dig in and find it with their dream interpretation skills, and see how it relates to the struggles that they go through, and the hopes that they might find in those struggles.
Yeah, because you could project what you want onto those symbols and then kind of reflect on them, like a
Yeah,
tarot card or something. Um,
yeah. Psychedelicart or dream interpretation, or
Well, there's like all this religious imagery, and there's like angels and devils. There's a lot of like duality, man and woman. There's like the pen and the sword. You see a lot of keys and locks, and and there's a lot of boobs and dicks and butts and pussies. It's very Freudian at every level. But then there's also these fragments of pop culture, like just these little cartoon tropes and images that are like employed almost like an allegory or something. Were there any kind of recurring symbols or like types of signifiers that like kept recurring and had specific meaning to you in this book?
well, there's all those things that you mentioned are in there, but you didn't mention, which I think one of the reoccurring things, since you asked, is skulls. And I was never, I don't even know, I was never into the Grateful Dead. I'm sure they're wonderful and people, that's a religion in itself, right? And certainly Rick Griffin did a lot of great, and others artists did a lot of great imagery for them. But I was never into like drawing skulls. But this book is full of not just skulls, but weird, surrealistic,
A lot of skulls.
crazy skulls. And I think that's because of the hardships I was going through, and because of and starting to think about death and dying, and
Yeah.
certainly skulls and skeletons, like are in my book, are a symbol of death. And at 73, I've got one foot in the grave, maybe a couple toes from the other one. You know?
So I want to know how you produce this. I can see that there's like, you can see some of the pencils. So you clearly had like an underdrawing, but you said you were doing these like sort of one a day. Were you doing like thumbnails and planning out the pages, or was it just kind of like revealing itself to you?
I mean, it's a combination of things in some sense, but I guess much of it is stream of consciousness. So I would just start with the horror that is a blank page. It's usually a horror, but I had so much emotion to put on paper, so much going on in my life, so many twists and turns, and I needed to cut open my wrist and bleed on that piece of paper. So it wasn't for the first time in my life, because most of my life I never drew. I mean, I've always, I mean, there would be a decade or 5 years or a decade where I never drew a line. Many periods of my life, but this I was compelled, and it was really because I wanted to express myself and get it poured out. And doing a page a day became art therapy. I would go right from the bed, still in my underwear, and sit down at the drawing board, and start pouring out a dream that I just woke up from. You know what I mean? In the morning. And so it's all very stream of consciousness, my emotions, not really planned out. One panel, one image would I would see where this was, kind of see subconsciously see where this was going, and it would lead to the next panel.
Were you starting with like the frame drawn on the page, or were you just like starting wherever and kind of like jumping around?
Well, both. I mean, I drew out a rectangle where I knew where the image space was, but then I would like just go to it. And I loved your description of the book. I think I'm going to go to the tattoo parlor today and transcribe and go to the tattoo parlor today and have that tattooed on my chest. But you did say that something about, sort of like you said, like the normal 6-panel page, but even the panels are surreal. I mean, the way I framed
Yeah,
the
yeah. This is something I really appreciated, was all of the experimentation with the structure. Like there's maybe 3 pages in there where something isn't breaking out of the frame. You've got negative space becoming positive space. You've got gutters overlapping and wrapping around each other. So like how much of the fun that you had out of this? I know you said it was kind of like therapeutic and maybe more cathartic, but like how much of the fun was just like, what can I do now with the gutters? How can I play with the format a little bit more? Was that like
well,
a big part of it for you, or?
a huge part of it, because I love comics, but as a kid, I fell in love with comics with Little Lulu and Uncle Scrooge by John Stanley and Carl Barks. But then I put, as the Bible says, when you become a man, you put away childish things, But then I rediscovered them secretly in junior high with my hippie friends, and then I never looked back. My life has, in so many ways, been comics, for good or for bad. I've focused so much on that, but I love comics. But I don't know how many people feel this way. And maybe don't admit it, or so many comic fans, I don't think they feel this way. But working every day with comics by creating these books about the history of comics and stuff like that, there's a part of me that's bored with comics. So in a way, I wanted to destroy comics. I want to reinvent comics. Those years where I didn't drive, I would think about, like, I should do my own comic and reinvent comics, and I want to create a comic like it looks like it was from Mars. It's like totally alien. Like, what the fuck is this? It's not. It's a comic, but it's not a comic. It's like a comic from another planet, another solar system.
It does have that feel a little bit. It feels like the Codex Seraphinianus, or like one of these, like a book, like a book in a language you can't read or something, but you see like these familiar shadows in there.
I thought about all the formalism and all the rules of comics, and I wanted to break every one. In fact, that's where I started. Let me tell you a story, and this will reveal, I think, a lot about me. In kindergarten, I remember, like the teacher passing out coloring book page to each student in kindergarten, and we started coloring away, and she walked around the room as we're sitting in our little chairs at our little tables. She says, "Craig, that's really good," which made me feel, her affirmation made me feel really good. It was proud. I was proud of my work. But that was only the first half of her sentence, because then she took another breath and said, "But you colored outside the lines." And then at that point, I knew two things. I wanted to be an artist, and I didn't know the word fuck. I never heard it before, but in kindergarten, I knew that I wanted to be an artist, and I wanted to color outside the lines, And so that's been my whole career. Some people like that. Jim Henson saw something creative in me. I'm not going to speak for him, and this is probably heresy, and it's maybe not true, but I think he wanted to shake up the Muppets a little bit. Yeah, they were all warm and fuzzy, and it was wonderful. But he didn't just do warm and fuzzy. I mean, he did Dark Crystal, and the working name for the Muppet Show wasn't the Muppet Show. It was
Sex and Violence.
Sex and Violence. So Jim had this wild, crazy side, But anyway, I think some people like my craziness. I mean, I have a relative that saw one of my drawings that I did recently, and this relative was very disturbed by it, which broke my heart again, and this and that in some sense. But I'm thinking that is who I am, Yeah, there's a mainstream side to me. I've been a design director. I've worked for these corporations and this and that. But so I want to be a designer. I want to be an artist, but I also want to color outside the lines. So with this book, I wanted to look at all the tropes, all the rules of comics, how you lay out a page, how you make sure that it's making sense, and I wanted to stop making sense. I wanted to color outside the lines. I wanted to break the rules. I wanted the panel borders to just be just as psychedelic. I wanted the panels themselves, the pages themselves, to be weird and crazy and alien and weird shit. Yet at the same time, balance it, like, also for those that want to dive in and figure out the story and see how it relates to them. I wanted them to be able to in some sense follow it. So, be on this acid trip with me.
Well, the comic frame demands that you do that, right? Because, like, even though it's like, like just like a a wall of like symbols and images and ideas and references and stuff, it's always got that comic panel motif, like basically 6 panels, sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's
Yes.
7, but
Yeah,
mostly
you're right.
6. And it you can follow that all the way through. And when you see that, you want to start reading it. You start filling in the spaces, you start completing the sequence. Closure, that's what they call it in understanding comics.
Well, something I just learned about drawing is that sometimes you leave things out, or maybe you have a line but you don't connect the line, so the viewer, the reader, fills in. So I think there's some of that going on, where the reader is looking at this and they're trying to figure it out, and they're making headway, but they're also getting involved. You know, I I think we enjoy stories. I mean, that's part of humankind. We Jesus talked in parables. To for his teachings. We enjoy stories, but oftentimes we're kind of a passive with comics. We're a passive observer of these stories, or even watching movies or TV or reading a book. Yeah, we're getting involved. We're identifying with the characters, but I think my book encourages, or maybe even demands, because my books may be pushy.
I would say
They
demand, actually. Yeah. Yeah. Your book
it,
is, it's a
you
lot of
get you
things, but it's not generous to the reader in terms of telling you
yeah,
what's going on,
need to get
you know?
involved. They need
Yeah.
to get
That's your
involved.
job as a reader in this.
They need to be willing to drop acid and figure it out.
I will, for sure. I just got it yesterday. I haven't had a chance yet, but I look forward to reading it over and over again and sharing it. I teach classes to adults on doodling. I'm a big fan of
Oh,
doodling. I think it is
oh,
very.
I mean, in some ways, these are doodles, because doodles are often subconscious, or if they're
Yeah, well, my
even
motto is don't think, do doodle. And I think
yeah,
that's kind of what you're doing with doodling, is you're trying to almost like watch yourself reveal something without like
yes.
worrying about it or thinking about it.
I mean, most of the artwork in there wasn't planned, or didn't even come to me in a dream where I saw it. But they're glorified doodles, because I myself was seeing what was being created. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, if you're drawing an issue of Spider-Man, oh, I got to show him in this pose. Oh, he's flying through the air. No, so you have an idea and you sketch out, that pose. But this, when I was drawing it, I was surprised, as maybe the reader will be, as to what was gestating, what was happening, what was being created.
That
It,
really
it,
comes across. That feeling comes across, that like as I'm like I could tell just like from what I've been able to flick through so far. Um uh yeah, like I feel like it's being revealed to you as it's being revealed to me in a sense, even though obviously chronologically we're at different
yeah,
time
yeah,
periods when
yeah,
it's
yeah.
happening, but it feels like that. And I think that's comforting, right? Like it feels like you're kind of like going on a journey with someone. And
Yes.
this is a book you need to pick up. Buy the book. Buy the book. It's not you, obviously. You have a copy, I see, but everyone else, buy the book. It's
It's
Woman and
like
Man Plus. Is that how you describe it? Because you've even got a symbol in the name. Like it's even
yeah, yeah, no, there's two symbols actually, because there's an ampersand and then a plus sign.
yeah,
Woman, man, plus.
Woman
Yeah,
Man Plus.
and they can get it from
And
Sulfur, which was, my esteemed publisher. I love Robbie and Hank and Ted there, and I couldn't believe they contacted me. They saw, I think they saw what I was doing, and they, because I used to post on social media some of the images, and hey, yeah, we want to publish your book. I'm like, what? Because I thought it was just, usually with your therapy you keep it private, but they wanted me to go public. you know, strip off my clothes and show myself to the world, and it's sorry mess.
well,
No one.
I think that's brave. I think that's bold, and I think you put a lot of positivity out in the world. So, I enjoy following you on Facebook. I enjoy this book. I enjoy all the books that you put out. Uh, and it's great. And so, um, thanks for coming on. I don't want to dox you, but you're in the Philippines, so we're in opposite time zones. So I really appreciate the effort there. Thanks for the book. Buy the book, Nostril Heads. You want to buy this book. The link's on the screen now. It's in the show description. I've got a video that'll come out just before this of me flicking through opening the mail. So
And I might mention, I don't have one yet, and maybe don't have one, but it comes in this wild, crazy, psychedelic, innovative slipcase too. That's die cut and reveals all kinds of stuff through the die cuts. It's pretty wild. So they can buy this anywhere on evil Amazon or their good local comic shop or bookstore. Brick and mortar place will order for them, but Clover Press might be the best place to get it, because you can get all kinds of extras like the slipcase and stickers and a signed edition and this and that. I hope they get it and keep in touch.
So Craig, do you have any? I've enjoyed talking to you too. This is great. I could go for another hour, but my recording won't continue. So I just want to know, Craig, do you have any other messages or sound effects of profound political or philosophical importance for all the nostril heads and yo-yos out there in the world?
I'm not even sure what a nostril head is. Those are like heavy breather.
You know it when you see it. It's like pornography.
There's pornography on the internet?
If you know where to look, send me a DM.
Okay.
I've seen some pretty good GeoCities pages.
On that note, the pleasure's been all mine, and keep up the great work. Nostril Heads and Yo-Yos, buy my book.
Wow. How about that Craig Yoe? And what a book. You should definitely buy this from Clover Press or Amazon or anywhere else books are sold. That's all the time we have this morning for Nostril Zone AM. Please remember to hit like, hit subscribe, be a ding-dong daddy, and ding that bell. Nostril Zone AM will be back some morning with more cartoon and comics interviews in the morning. But until then, consider joining the Patreon, where you get early access to videos like this and all of my videos, including Pickin' and Flickin' and Canonically Crumb. Thanks again. Have a great day.